There we go. Now we're learning about the Song of Songs that King Solomon sang. And this thing King Solomon wrote. And what is the Song of Songs? Oh, excuse me. It is a song of love between God and the Jewish people and Jewish people and God. And the Rebbe is saying that it's not just a song, but it's a dynamic relationship between us and God. You might think, and that God is it's too much, too high, too infinite. How can we possibly expect that God has this relationship with us, that we love him and he loves us? And the Rebbe even explains that there's two types of love that we have for him and two types of love that he has for us, for God has for us. And so the answer is to that is that's the whole essence of what Judaism is. The Judaism is to reveal God in the world, to do the impossible in a way, to reveal God in the world. But God showed us that it wasn't impossible, that when he took the Jews out of Egypt and he gave them the Torah, he was revealed. And when there was the Holy Temple, he was also revealed. But we see a very interesting thing, that when God revealed himself, when God was revealed in the world, and what does that mean when he's revealed in the world? That we just feel that the whole entire world is a creation. It's just a creation and it becomes transparent. And that everything suddenly becomes much more real and meaningful and important and alive and mysterious. And that we see how amazing the world is. And that's just the outside aspect of God, that he creates the world. Even more deep is how he gives the Torah. And then we're going to see there's something even more deep than that. That's essentially the commandments, but we'll get to that. And so that's the amazing mystery that Abraham revealed. That God wants to be revealed in the world because God is creating the world. The only thing that's lacking by God is being revealed here. But the fact is, he is creating the world, and the world doesn't really exist except for the fact that he's creating it. God is creating the world. And that's what God chose the Jews for. He chose the Jews to be his people. But like I say, we see a very interesting thing, that when God reveals himself, it makes people do sins. Right? God revealed himself to the Jewish people in Egypt, and most of the people didn't even want to leave. It says after the 9 of the 10 plagues, they didn't want to leave. Then after God took the Jews out, they wanted to go back. And after God gave the Torah to the Jews and said, don't worship idols, they worshiped the idols. And after God forgave them for the idols and said, okay, you're going to go into the land of Israel, they say, we don't want to go in. We're not going to go in the land of Israel. And after that got resolved, so they picked a new leader. They picked Korach. And they said, he's going to be our leader. We don't need you, Moses. So the Jews were always making trouble for God, despite the fact that God revealed himself to them and did big miracles. Because that's how important it is to God that there should be an independent world. And that in this world, God should be revealed. That's what God wants. There should be a world and that people should choose to serve the Creator, to go against nature, to not only defy nature, but also to refine nature and to redefine nature, to make a new nature, a new world. That's the idea of Mashiach. Mashiach is going to make a new world. And the whole thing of Mashiach is the Torah. That's the whole essence of Mashiach. The purpose of Mashiach and the goal of the Mashiach and the tool of the Mashiach is the Torah, and to reveal the godliness which is in the Torah, the holiness which is in the Torah, which is even more than the holiness that's in the world. And so that's the whole point, to put this holiness of the Torah into the world, and that depends on us changing our nature. We have to change our nature. How do you have to change our nature? What do you have to do? Sit on beds of nails or something, or don't eat, or sit in the cold for 20 years? No. That's not what changing our nature means. Loving God. It's not to our nature to love God. The nature of a person is to love himself. And maybe you can love God for what he does for me, or I'm going to get some benefit from it. But to change your nature and to love God for no other reason except for how good God is, and even though it's going to be bad for me, that's what Abraham brought into the world. God tested him with 10 tests. The belief that Abraham they had for God, and that Abraham stood against the whole entire world. What was his reward for it? He got tested 10 times. 10 times. Terrible tests. And finally, the last test was God said to Abraham, take your son and kill him. Terrible, awesome, soul-shaking tests that Abraham got, because that's the essence of a Jew. And what is a test? To change your nature, to go against your nature. Things that would usually make a person angry, he didn't get angry. Things would make a person depressed, Abraham didn't get depressed. Things that would make Abraham not to connect to God, he connected to God. Not to believe in God, he believed in God. Not to love God, he loved God. God gave him all these tests to make Abraham act normal. And Abraham said, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do what you want, God. Against it. And Abraham got no reward for it, basically. He got no reward. God promised him the land of Israel, didn't get it. And his son didn't get it. And it was only, 400 years later, he got the land of Israel. God promised him he's going to have children like the stars of the sky. And that still has not happened. I mean, it's if it depends how you interpret that. But in any case, simply it hasn't happened. So what did Abraham do? He gave the idea of serving the creator of the world with the promise that God will reveal himself in the world. And when God does reveal himself in the world, it doesn't really necessarily change things that much. Right? Like we say, when God revealed himself in the Torah, so the Jews worshiped the golden calf. But eventually there's going to be some sort of a revelation in the world that people will see so clearly that God is good that they won't want to go against God anymore. Okay, so here we go. So last time, what did we talk about? We talked about the Song of Songs. That's this whole Song of Songs business that King Solomon is singing to God. And God is singing to King Solomon, and God reacts to what King Solomon does. And King Solomon is saying that we can do the same thing. We can also make God react to us. So he says, how? He says, when we love God, and we love God because God is so great, and God is so good, and God is so wonderful, and God is so precious, and we have this longing for God. That's called kala. Kala means we have kaluta nefesh. We have longing for God. Then God reacts. And then we can start feeling a little bit, maybe, the godliness in the Torah. Godliness in the Torah. And that's what's called drawing God's great name down. Shmei Rabbah, his great name. God's great name is the source of the world, the source of the Torah. We draw it down, but only in the upper spiritual worlds. Only in the upper spiritual worlds. So the Torah becomes, we have this sort of sense vaguely that the Torah is true because of the work that we're doing by loving God, as this makes the Torah and Judaism more alive, but in a sort of a spiritual way. So that's the first step. When we love God in this way that we're separate, but we really appreciate God, so the reaction is that God reacts, but also he's sort of separate from us. He's also separate. He reveals in the upper spiritual worlds. So it's more accessible. It's like somebody putting $1 million in your bank account, but you can't take it out. Or you can take it out $1 at a time. You can go and look at it whenever you want to or something. Okay, so it says the Rebbe, Hine, behold, calls all of this that we just explained, that when we have this what's called separate love of God. So God reveals himself in sort of a separate way. So that's called the Chatan v'Kala. God is Chatan. Yes.
I think we didn't get there yet.
We didn't get here yet. We didn't get here, but I'm sort of skipping. If you want to, we can do this. We can do this part.
No. Fine. No, fine.
Here he says, let's just do this one part so you'll see this is what we're talking about. That's what it means, Shira Shirim Asher LeShlomo. That's what it means, the song of songs that is to King Solomon. Shir, what is a song? A song is Hitkalut Baratzav V'Shov. It's an undulation. What do we call it? Moving back and forth. Song, a melody. What makes a note? A note is a different vibration of sound, of the air, whatever you call it. And when you put a bunch of notes together, so generally speaking, that's what sound is, right? So you sing a song, so it's movements, moving back and forth. This in spirituality is called touching and not touching. This is usually there's what's called Rotzev V'Shov, means that that's from below to above. We go up to God because God is so good, but God becomes so powerful and real and how do you say awesome that we can't come too close. We go back. So that's going up and back. And God reacts in a similar way, which is called mati v'lo mati. God comes and touches the world, but he goes back, touching the world. That's also called dodi dofek. That's the dofek we said before. Dofek pischili dofek. That's the defika. That's the pulsation. That's the song of us to God. We sing to God. God reacts to us. God reacts to us. We sing to Him, etc. Mati v'lo mati. He was skipping the parentheses. Bezeu, that's what it means. Where's the parentheses over here? Just a moment. What did I do? Bezeu, that's what it means. Shira Shirim, the Song of Songs. What does it mean? King Solomon is talking about the godliness, the source, this interrelationship between God and the Jews, that from it, Mekabli Mashirin, that all of the other songs, all the other interrelationships between God and the Jewish people and Jewish people of God, they receive from this master song. Because there's a lot of different levels of song. In this case, song means ours bringing energy up to God, God reacting to us reacting to God's reaction, and etc. There's a lot of different levels from above to below and below to above. Kimakor anivroim, the source of the creations that creates everything from something to nothing. It goes back up. The source goes back up, and it is included in God. Shir, a rotz of a shov, in a way of going and coming back. Bagam, and he also, after this godliness reacts to what we do and it comes down into the world, Aliyah Sa'olamos, the worlds again go back up, and they're including, this is also called a song. Kamo Nigun, like a song that we sing. Menagin sheyesh bo kolot olim v'yordim. Voices go up and down. Right, going up and down. That's a voice. The songs don't just go. That's a song. Want to hear the second verse? Now the third verse. That's not a song. That's just a note. A song is oh, it's going up and down. That's already a song. So it is also true with the Jewish people. They put energy up to God, going up, and God reacts with energy also coming down. And there's many types of going up and down. Ad ein kates v'shir. But the whole thing is a relationship with God. In this way is called a song. And that's what it means called Bali Shir Yotzim Bashir. Did we do this last time? I don't remember. Shir. Look at that. Okay. Hine. Call a shirim, all these songs that go from below to above. That's called Shira. It's called feminine. Nakeva. Like it says, Hashira Hazot. That's when the Jews went over the Yam Suf, they sang a song. Kala, that's the level of Kala, the bride. We taught the bride and the groom. That's the bride that's singing from below to above. Feminine. Kala, from this, Kala, when we give our energy up to God, this draws down Simchat HaChatan. This draws down God from above. He becomes the groom. This is the joy of the groom coming down, revealing from the concealed to be revealed. B'sameach Chatanina b'Kala. Then the Chatan rejoices with the Kala. What does it mean? With the Kala, by means of the Kala. By means of what the Jewish people do, that by means of us singing our song, by means of us putting up our energy to God, as this draws down a shir elyon, a song from God. Namely, what happens? Hamshachas or Ein Sof, a soul of calling the aspect of God that surrounds all the worlds from this Shem HaGadol, from the great name of God. This is the great upper pleasure of God is drawn into the world. We're going to see in a minute that this is still the lowest level. We'll see. This is not the highest level. That Shema Yisrael is drawn into the souls of the Jews, shir, shirim, songs, and etc., into the Jewish people. Okay, so we can see what happens over here. You can see this in Israel. I don't know how it goes to other places, but you can see in Israel that there's a lot of Jews now, very common, that they recognize that God is right. They start doing the commandments, the Torah. They don't think about heaven. They don't think about hell. It's not in their agenda at all. They're not religious people. They do the commandments because they realize that they come from God. And they realize that God is not a religious figure. It's just truth. It's true. So it's not hard for them to do Torah, to learn Torah, to do the commandments, etc. Okay, I don't know how much they'll go against their nature, right? If they have trouble, difficulties, I don't know. I simply don't know. But one thing I do see, and I know, 100%, for instance, take an example. In Israel, almost all of the popular singers now, it used to be that all the popular singers were totally non-religious, wild people, right? And a lot of them even anti-religious people. A lot of them, they were all big leftists and this and that. Nowadays, almost every one of the popular singers in Israel does commandments, and they're proud of it. They keep Shabbat, they eat kosher, they don't appear on Shabbat, they put on tefillin, a lot of them, etc. Some of them are just religious people. They appear in tzitzit and everything, and they make no mention of religion on the of God on the stage. It's just their personal thing. They're not advertising anything. They're advertising the music that they make. So we see that God more and more is becoming revealed in a Jewish way in the world. And more stores are closing on Shabbat and etc. Okay, it hasn't worked its way down into the world in a total way, but nevertheless, we do see godliness being revealed, because the big problem is we don't know what godliness is. We don't know, in general, we don't know what good is. In general, we don't know what is good. We know what it means avoiding bad, right? Someone gets sick and all of a sudden they get well. All these miracles from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. People are sick, all of a sudden they write into the Rebbe, they get well. A person is going bankrupt, he writes to the Rebbe, all of a sudden everything turns around. A person he gets put into jail, he writes to the Rebbe, he gets out. A person has troubles with his children, he writes to the Rebbe. There's endless stories about people that were in trouble or they were in difficulty, and they wrote to the Rebbe, they saw big miracles, and they got out. That we can relate to, getting away from the bad, but getting toward the good. I don't know if we know what good is, what really good is. We take good for granted. When there's good things, so that's good, that's the way it's supposed to be. When there's trouble, then we start praying. But when there's good things, we should give thanks to God just that we have two eyes instead of one eye, that we have one eye instead of a half, and instead of no eyes, that we wake up in the morning, that our feet touch the ground, that the ground doesn't not on top of us, that we're on top of the ground. We should be really thankful to everything, right? But that's already nature. Do we have any comprehension what is good? What it means, a revelation of God? What is that? So the only sort of connection we can have is having a positive attitude. That you're positive. The world doesn't get you down. You feel good about life in general. That's already that's in any case, that's the goal of Mashiach, to make God revealed in the world. If that's called the revelation of God, I don't know, because I also don't know what it means good. I also don't know what it means God will be revealed, and then all the Jewish people will come back to Israel. So maybe it's just a psychological thing. Maybe no, it's going to be a revelation of God himself, says the Rebbe. Okay, I have to think about it a little bit more, exactly what this means. And even if there is a big revelation of God, if we could really appreciate it. If we could, it's something like, well, I'll give you maybe an example. I don't know if it's a good example, but I give you the example anyway. Let's say someone was to give me right now $1 billion, right? $1 billion. I wouldn't really know what it means, to tell you the truth. I mean, I have no real use for $1 billion. It would be the same thing to me if somebody gave me $1 billion. Frankly, I'm telling you the truth. Someone would give me $1 billion, or someone would give me $1 million, or someone would give me $1,000, or $10,000. It would be a very nice thing, very nice. I would ask him, where'd you get the money from? Why are you giving me this money? And what I wouldn't say, wow, $1 billion, that's right, I'm going to use it. Ooh, this is so amazing. $10 billion. But to me, it makes no difference, because I'm not a businessman, and I don't know really what to do with these things. Maybe if I was more involved and I knew how the institutions in Chabad needed charity and how they were desperate, I would say, oh, this is wonderful, I'll give it to them. But I don't know of those things. I'm sure that it was true. I'm sure there's people who could. So if you don't really know what to do with these things, the same thing with godliness. What do you do when there's a big revelation of godliness? What's he talking about? But the Rebbe knows what he's talking about. The Rebbe does have a use for this. Revelation of godliness is what he's after. That's the idea why we want the Holy Temple to be built. There'll be a revelation of godliness. So let's just suffice it to say that when there's a revelation of godliness, there won't be any more bad in the world. There won't be any more wars. There won't be any more famine. There won't be any more idolatry. There won't be any more hatred, right? What will there be? There will be love. There will be happiness. There will be meaning. There will be productivity, right? Okay, so those things. Says the Rebbe, this is only the lower level of bride and groom. That's only the lower level of bride and groom. Let's skip this over here, and let's get to the higher level. Hine calls all this bechinet chatana echad. This is only the level of the first bride and groom relationship. We said that's the lower type of love of God, kala. That God is separate from me, but I love him. He's so wonderful. That's the lower level. And God then reacts, but in, so to speak, in a more hidden way. That's called chut darga. The chatan, that's because he comes down. Or Ein Sof, to be enclosed in the Torah and the wisdom of the Torah. You feel the godliness in the Torah and etc. But in the upper worlds, we'll see. This is a little bit complicated. But the second level of the chatan, which we said that comes from the essence, that's like soviv ka'omim. This is when it's already been drawn down, godliness into the Torah, and then for afterwards in the Torah, but then afterwards it's drawn into the lower worlds, like it says v'yakam eidos b'Yakov, that we draw the same godliness down from God's great name, but not just in the upper worlds, not just in the spiritual. So we have this vague feeling of the holiness of the Torah and the goodness of God, but it's drawn down into the physical world. So we feel Torah Sambi Yisrael, that God puts Torah in the Jewish people, the revelation of godliness below in the world, just like it is up in the heavens. That's one of the reasons why in the 5 books of Moses doesn't talk about heaven. In Judaism, we certainly do believe in heaven. Reward and punishment, having an afterlife, is one of like the Rambam's 13 principles of faith. But it's totally not stressed. Why? because we want that this revelation of godliness that's in the upper worlds should be also in the lower worlds down here, and in a way even more in this world. And there should also be drawn this pleasure of God into Torah mitzvahs, into what's called Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, in the lower worlds till it gets to the physical world. And that's what the rabbis say, 2,000 years, Kodem Shenivra Olam, 2,000 years before the world was created, the Torah existed. What does it mean, 2,000 years? This is what's called Chachma and Bina, Aleph Chachma, Aleph Bina. And this is before the world. This is higher than the world. Our goal is to draw this down into the physical world, so we feel the holiness of the Torah. This is God's great name, Chachma and Bina. That's the Chatan, the first level, because it's just up in Chachma and Bina. That's what's drawn up there, only in the upper worlds. But afterwards, there's the second level of the Chatan, the second level of the groom. And this, the Torah comes, Torah, the Beit Alafim, is drawn from this level of the 2,000 years that's before the world into this physical world. And this is going to be mainly by means of the commandments. In a way, the commandments are higher than the Torah because the commandments deal with this physical world, pure godliness in this physical world. And that's why all that's what's going to eventually happen, I mean, very in a simple way, is all these other religions, especially, the Christians, that they totally misinterpret and twist and distort the Torah. And the reason they do is because you can't feel any godliness in the Torah. The Torah seems like this just empty clay or whatever, mud. You can just do whatever you want to with it. And they did. They did whatever they wanted to. But it says when Mashiach comes and you feel the godliness in the Torah in this physical world, no one will want to touch and distort the Torah anymore. Exactly the opposite. Everyone will realize that the pure godliness, the source of life in this physical world, comes from the Torah. And that's really going to be expressed mostly through the commandments, the holy commandments. Because the commandments, that's what brings the Torah into the physical things in this world. And that's this love relationship that King Solomon is talking about, that when we devote ourselves totally to the Creator, as the Creator reveals his godliness, mostly in the commandments, in the physical commandments. So every command will be like a precious, joyous thing. I don't know if you can find any example, but let's say, for instance, and I give an example, a person finds a piece of paper on the street, something's written on it. And it's interesting, nice writing, it's a parchment, and some expert comes up and says, where did you get that? I don't know, I found it laying on the street. He says, man, I don't know where that could possibly be, but do you know that? That is original script from the Rambam. This thing is more than 800 years old. This is incredibly, look at it, this must be worth at least $2-3 million. Right? All of a sudden you're holding this piece of paper and you think, wow, hey, this is pretty amazing. I have this thing that's really worth, and you know what's written over here. This is one paragraph in the Rambam that everybody has a question on, how it should be written, and this is answering the question. I don't believe it. All of a sudden, and that's what's going to be the whole world. Everything in the world, I'm going to say, hey, that rock, this comes from God. This every minute comes from God. People will feel the wonder and the joy of every instant of life and our opportunity. And that's all going to come through the commandments. That's all the commandments. That's the Simcha Shel Mitzvah. It'll be revealed into the whole world. That's the second level of Chatan V'Kala. That's the rejoicing of the bride, which is the Jewish people, and the groom, which is God, but in a really deep way. That'll be like the consummation of the wedding. And the Mount Sinai was just like the engagement. And that was going to be the consummation of the wedding through the Torah and the commandments, as we're going to learn, God willing, next week. Here's where we got up to. Yes, okay, so and we'll continue, God willing, next week with more, and hopefully by next week we'll be seeing all these things instead of just learning about them, but at least we'll be among the lucky few that will understand what's going on. Or at least we've been waiting for it to happen. Okay?
Zat Hashem. Amen.
Have a good week with Moshiach Now. And we'll talk next week. Good?
Zat Hashem. Yes. On Monday, Bezat Hashem next week.
Monday. Wonderful. Wonderful. We have a date. Shalom. Listen. Okay, good. Monday. Good. We'll do it Monday. It could be that Monday I'll see. I might be up in Miron, but that doesn't make it me. I'll bring my computer up there and we can learn from there. In any case, we'll learn next week. Good. Have a good Shabbat.
Do they sell the tickets now?
The whole thing is crazy. It's really crazy. I mean, the reason that there was this tremendous confusion last year and all these people is because they tried to control it too much. They tried to control. They still haven't figured out what it is. I think maybe they did figure out. They just don't want to say. But really, what happened is that the police wanted to control everything, so they closed up one place and they didn't let the other people know. And so because of that, there was trampling and everything. I mean, it was a terrible, terrible tragedy what happened, but it happened not because there were too many people there. That's not the reason it happened. It didn't come because overcrowding. It came because they told people to go in one place and then they closed that place up and there was no way to go back. And so there was a terrible thing that happened. How are they going to fix it up? By controlling everybody. Exactly the thing that they did last year to cause this whole confusion. So now they decided they're going to sell tickets. They have no appreciation of what Rebbe Shimon is, no appreciation of why people go up there. They don't know what's going on. They just don't want it to be. They have to do something. They have to take control. We're going to do something, as though they could do something. So what they're doing now is they're selling tickets. So no more than 100,000 tickets. My son, who lives there in Miron, says they already sold out. The tickets are already sold out. So if so, it's just going to be a total confusion. We'll see what happens this year. But in any case, I'm considering that either I'll go up there in the beginning of next week. Wait, one second. When is Lag BaOmer? It's next week, isn't it? Or the weekend?
Next week, yes.
Next week, yeah. So either I'll go up there next week. Either I'll go up next week, or I'll go up at the beginning of next week. Sorry. Either I'll go up the beginning of next week, or I will go up the end of next week. The end of next week. In other words, after Lag BaOmer, the day after. Just one second, I'm going to do something. I'll go because Lag BaOmer is going to be on Thursday, right? So Friday they're going to let people go up there. There won't be any big rush. So I'll go up there Friday because that's when my son's going to be, and my family will be up there. So I'll go up. We'll see. A lot of places invited me to play and to speak. We'll see if it comes out because everything the plans are changing all the time. But if I appear somewhere, then I won't go up to Lag BaOmer to the Miron on Lag BaOmer. I'll go the day after. They say that the revelation of holiness lasts 3 days, is 3 days before and 3 days after. So I'll make use of that. In any case, the Rebbe says that he's found in the Taluchot. That's where he is, in the marches of the kids. So maybe that's what I'll do. In any case, we'll see. But next week we'll learn. Makes no difference. However it is, we'll learn next week. So God bless you. Have a good Shabbos with Moshiach Now, and we'll talk next week. Shalom uvracha.
Shalom uvracha. Have a great week and a good Shabbos
too. You too. Thank you. Shalom.
Shalom.